I'm Bob. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it is for my own healing. I welcome all thoughts, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. I let go of my desire for power and control. I let go of the desire of for infection, affection, esteem, approval, and pleasure. I let go of my desire for survival and security. I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within. Amen. That's Father Thomas Keating. He was kind of the successor to Merton in the Cistercian order. Quite a guy. One of my favorite authors, Anthony DeMello, an East Indian Jesuit heretic who was just fabulous. A man found an eagle egg and put it to rest in a barnyard hen, with a barnyard hen. The eagle had hatched, and the brood of chicks grew up with him. All his life, the eagle did what barnyard chicks do, thinking he was a barnyard chicken. He scratched for the earth for worms and insects. He clucked and cackled, and he would thrash his wings and fly a few feet in the air. Years passed, and the eagle grew very old. One day he saw a magnificent bird above him in the cloudless sky. It glided gracefully with majesty and on the powerful wind currents and scarcely beat on his strong golden wings. The old eagle looked up in awe and said, "What's that?" he asked. And he said, "That's the eagle, the king of the birds," said his neighbor. "He belonged to the sky. We belong to the earth. We're chickens." So the eagle lived and died a chicken, for that's what he thought he was. I don't know how long I'm going to take to do this. It's anywhere from half hour to 3. It's a little iffy. I woke up at 4:30 this morning and re-listened to some stuff that I'm sure will confuse me. I'm just going to talk about God and Bob. In addition to all this stuff that I'm going to talk about, I have a spiritual practice. I'm an old guy, I've got time. I read 30 meditation books a day that are on this pad. Barclay or someone took a picture of it, and I'm not sure what. That list will go out.
Barclay, we'll add it to the photo. Perfect.
I do a guided meditation for about 20 minutes in the morning. I used to do it in bed at night. The guy recommended that you can start doing that, and my wife and I would do that together at night. And now, as I get older, I get up at earlier than I ever thought I'd ever get up. And I do that guided meditation. And then I go to Rojo. I go to Rojo 7 days a week. And it's a wonderful way. That's a 2-hour block of time that sets my day. And it's my practice. In addition to that, I go to 3 in-person meetings. I sponsor men, and I'm an active participant in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it has been the treasure of my life. I've been sober 57 years. I've been married 57 years. I had my last drink on my honeymoon. And I am deeply in love with my wife. I have 3 kids, and our relationships are clean. They're good men. At one time, all were in AA. 2 of them are sober in excess of 30 years, and the youngest is restarting. And he's got a little over half a year from smoking dope. He had 17 years when he changed. My life is embarrassingly wonderful. I shit in it less than I ever have because of you guys. And you guys have an influence. I swim in the collective consciousness of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hope that I always have that influence in my life to the extent that I do. So in some ways, I think many of us, when we think about God and we think about religion, I was churched, grade school, high school, and university, and Catholic thing. Very meaningful to me. And then when I found masturbation and alcohol, I became an associate member of the Catholic Church. I literally went to confession daily at Notre Dame. Didn't modify my behavior, but in order to receive communion, that seemed somewhat necessary. And I'm still a participating Catholic. And as meaningful as that is for me, and I mostly do that because I like the sacraments, there's no dogma. As I grew up, my experience with my religion was about belief. And what I love about us is, in many ways, we don't care about what you believe. We want to know what your experience is. And you can go into any meeting with any amount of sobriety, little or large, and ask people about the spiritual awakening, and ask people about their experience with the God of their understanding. And everybody can share some experience around the God of their understanding. It seems like when we get exposed to religion and we start talking about it, it seems like God started when Christ was on earth. I remember asking a Trappist one time, as my view of religion started to broaden a little bit, and I said, what is this stuff about, are all the Buddhists going to die and go to hell and become charcoal briquettes to cook the chicken for the Bible fellowship of, Christianity? He said, no. He said, Jesus was a historic figure. Christ is an eternal figure. He said, who is to say that the Christ did not come to Buddha or to Muhammad or to the Hindus? It is a timeless and eternal thing. I want to talk just a minute about the Big Bang, which was the start of it all. It's funny that the Big Bang wasn't really until the mid-50s, wasn't really part of our scientific belief. Can you believe that? We really only confirmed that sort of knowledge. So 13.8 billion years ago, we had this magnificent explosion from a pinpoint where everything in the world was condensed into a pinpoint. Came this massive explosion that we call the Big Bang. Within a second, the universe experienced an expansion to hundreds of millions of miles across. And it contained every bit of material that is in the world today. In less than a minute, in less than the time it takes to make a sandwich, it expanded to that. We are the stuff of the stars. If that expansion would have been less fast, we wouldn't have the diversity, we wouldn't have the ripples in the universe that we have and needed. The universe would have been uniform throughout, and we wouldn't have the creation that these ripples. And these ripples, at the time of that explosion, there was matter and antimatter. And had there not been an excess of about 1 billion to 1, there were 1 in a billion particles of matter over antimatter, nothing would be here. Everything would have annihilated itself. Such is the beauty. So my point in all this stuff is to talk about the beauty and the immensity that we are surrounded with. In that, as those things coalesced for the first 380 million years, there were no atoms. There were just subatomic particles. It was just too hot for anything to form. Do you know what the most populous element is in the universe? Hydrogen. You know what percent it is of the atoms in the universe? 74% of the universe is hydrogen. You know what the next most active one is? Helium. Helium is 24%. And every other element in the universe makes up that remaining 1%. I mean, it's just astounding. Now, if that was all there was, if we wouldn't be here, Earth wouldn't be here. So that first period of time, after the 380 million years when atoms could start to form, helium formed and hydrogen formed, hydrogen and helium. And when the stars started to form, they were able, in the early phase of the universe, to make it was hot enough to make the first 5 elements. But none of the heavier elements that are so critical, carbon and iron and things that we need for the very essence of our living, were around. And everybody always kind of wondered where the hell they come from. I mean, if the whole world was hydrogen, how did it start out? And what they discovered over a long period of time is as these very large stars, 20 to 30 times larger than our sun, died, the stars would make all the elements up to iron. And when the stars started to make iron, iron took too much energy. And it didn't, all the other ones, when they created energy along with creating new elements. When iron came, it took too much energy and the stars started to die. And when these stars died, they compressed into a neutron star. A neutron star has a density that if you took a teaspoon of a neutron star, it would weigh something like 300,000 tons. A teaspoon. And that star would implode. And in the force of that implosion, all the elements up to uranium were created in that thing and blown out into the universe, of which we are part of. We are the stuff of the stars. And about 4.5 billion years ago, 5 billion years ago, there was one of those stellar explosions in the Milky Way. The Milky Way has somewhere between 150 and 200 million stars. The Milky Way is one of billion stars. The Milky Way is one of 150 billion galaxies. The average distance between stars in the universe is 20 million miles. The universe is beyond conception, beyond understanding. So this gaseous cloud in one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way coalesced and created our solar system. 99.9% of that cloud ended up making the sun. And then the rings that we sometimes see around Saturn and different things coalesced and started to form, through static attraction. Planets started to form. And they think the planets formed in a relatively short period of time, like maybe 10, 20,000 years. And the Earth formed around 4.7 billion years ago. And about 4.4 billion years ago, something the size of Mars crashed into the Earth and created our moon. And within, they think, a matter of weeks, that recoalesced to our moon. Without our moon, we wouldn't be here. Without our moon, we would not have the atmosphere that we have, and we would not have the magnetic protection that we have in the Earth. The design is just unbelievable. Our planet, if they used to think if it was 5% closer or 10% further away, we wouldn't be able to be here. You know, Venus, which is 25 million miles closer to the sun, has an average temperature of 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Mars is frozen stiff, which is further away. We are the Goldilocks. We are in exactly the right zone, that we have exactly the right atmosphere to be able to maintain this thing we call life. And through that process, you know, they think there's been life on Earth for billions of years. Man, as we know, you know, Homo erectus has been around for about 100,000 years. Neanderthal and other, you know, predecessors of human beings were around prior to that. In order for you to be sitting in your chair, do you know how many successful births there would have to have been of your ancestors for you to be sitting in your chair? So many times in AA meetings, we talk about the complaints about our parents. Without your parents, you would not be here. If you were conceived 1 second later, you would be your brother or sister. You would not be you. Think of that. Just in 1 second later, you would have been your brother or someone else. Only your mother and father, and only at that time, and only with that egg, and only with that sperm, were they able to take their combined DNA and give it to you. Everything you are. And that wouldn't have happened if the previous 25, you know, reincarnations of your family wouldn't have happened. It is a gift. Life is a gift, and you, in your particularity, are a gift. Your body contains, depends on who you talk to. The book that I've listened to probably a half a dozen times is called A Brief History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. And it's old. It's not now, like he wrote it in 2000 maybe or something like that. And there's so much that we've discovered in the last years. But he takes every scientific category and spends, he is just articulate and funny and interesting, and he makes all these complicated situations interesting enough to listen to. But there's somewhere around 50 trillion cells in your body. 1,000 pieces of paper is 30 feet high. 1 million pieces of paper as high as the Empire State Building. 1 billion pieces of paper is as tall as Mount Everest. 1 trillion pieces of paper would go to the moon and back a number of times. You have 50 trillion cells in your body. There isn't any material probably within any cell in your body that's less than a few days old. Cells replace themselves. Every cell in your body is replaced, but before it's replaced, the body repairs any damage, and there's damage in cells all the time, automatically within the existing cell. Every blood cell in your body is replaced over 4 months. Every red blood cell. They're the largest amounts of cell in your body. Think of that. Automatically, you got any thought process about that? Who does that? Whose mind is that? It's the mind of God. It is, I remember a friend of ours had a heart transplant, a French doctor, ran a couple of psychiatric units in Paris and Carcassonne. And when he had the heart transplant, he had a vineyard, and he was a wine drinker. And all of a sudden, his wife starts to notice that he's having a beer occasionally, and he's eating pizza. And he is, this is not in his gastronomic background. And he got a little curious about that, and he called Nigerian. It was a heart specialist who did the transplant. And Nigerian, because he was a doctor, Nigerian shared the details. And what he got was the heart of a 25-year-old guy in Wisconsin that was out drinking beer and eating pizza. Where is the mind? Is the mind in the cells? I mean, if we had any sense of the wonder of who we are, we would just be flabbergasted that this is going on automatically. Every cell in your body, every cell with the exception of sperm and one or two other minor red blood cells, I think, has 6 feet of DNA inside a cell, which is so microscopic that you have to magnify it, 100 times to be able to even see it. 6 feet of DNA, which sole purpose is to replicate. Such is the importance and the vitality of life. And in addition to whatever religious ideas I have about God and my own spiritual experience, I have had an increasing appreciation for the universality of God, for the eternalness of God. We are experiencing, some people think that the first manifestation of God was Christ coming down. I think the Big Bang was the first manifestation of God. And one of those ideas does not have to preclude the other idea. It is both and. It is included in. They are holons within holons, and they are included with each other. And I believe that this evolution of humankind is the forward motion of the spirit and will and mind of God. And that more than anything else, the universe and God are constantly asking us to live and to say yes. We are wired to say no. The ego is a separator and a protector and a controller. It looks for differences. It looks to separate. That a picture of Chuck Chamberlain. So we started a conference in Minnesota called Gopher State Roundup. It's one of the larger roundups. It's got 7,000-8,000 people usually. And for the first 5 years, we asked Chamberlain to come. And we used to go up to his room, 10 o'clock at night and talk till like 1 in the morning. There'd be 15, 20 of us. And I'm sitting at his feet. I mean, Chuck was a guy from LA. He was Richard Chamberlain's dad. He was a guy who was in the, he made refrigeration units and stuff designed for grocery stores. Bob Barker, Queen for a Day, movie star, helped finance Chuck to go buy that business. Chuck is the guy that wrote, the book, A New Pair of Glasses. That's Chuck Chamberlain. And Chuck looked at me one time and he said, "Son, you're not going anyplace. You already are everything you're ever going to be." He says, "I can tell you're a little disappointed in that." I said, "Hell, I don't even understand it." But with all the participation and all the practice that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous, are we different? Are we not the same people we have always been? The process of God is a process of removal, not addition. You get down inside of any of us, and I believe with every fiber of my body, we are made in the image and likeness of God. When we remove what is in the way, when we take away the impediments, there's a clearing. There's a spot in each one of us, the original equipment manufacturer, intact, unchanged, unsullied. That's just fine. And we offer the opportunity through the spiritual practice of the steps to open ourselves up to a consciousness. You can't change anything, I can't change anything in my life of significance until my consciousness changes. The seed of my disease is in my subconscious. And what you men have taken me through in the steps and in my recovery is a bone-deep experience which reaches my subconscious. You know, that's like psychologists, Joe and Harry, two psychologists created the Johari window. There's 4 panes in the window. One pane is no one can see, subconscious. One pane is only I can see. Oh, Christ. And one pane everybody can see. I don't know what the hell the 4th one is. And the object of becoming a fuller person is to enlarge the pain that everyone can see. Your ego thinks it's to close that off, where only I can see. But God wants us to expand, not contract. God wants us to say yes, not no. God wants life. God is this constant movement of love and life. And over a period of time, all the religions of the world have tried to corral God, the word God. We wouldn't be here today unless we had the idea of a God of our understanding. If we had Bill took instruction from Bishop Sheen in the Catholic Church, and he was seriously thinking about becoming Catholic. And he concluded, much as Dr. Bob concluded, that if he would have done that, that would have injected a religious element into AA that would have been negative. When you talk about the many things he did for us, and that was one of them, that he didn't want to, have any specific attention and any specific religion, and to keep the idea open and available to all of us. You think you're sitting in your chair. The earth is going 1,000 miles an hour as it revolves. It is going where the hell is it? It is orbiting around the sun 584,000 miles an hour. And the Milky Way and the universe is expanding like 1,000,000 miles an hour. We're revolving around the earth. We're orbiting around the sun. our solar system is orbiting in the Milky Way, and the universe is expanding millions of miles a moment, and we think we're sitting in our seats. So the idea of God and the idea of, and when I get into that for myself, there's a humility in that. There's a sense of what interferes more than anything else is our minds. When our minds are connected to our heart and soul, that unity has a way of opening our consciousness to put us in tune with the Spirit. And many of the mystics that I read talk about there's only one mind. We're sharing the mind. We're eyeballs on a balloon, sharing one mind. There's only one Spirit. The Spirit we're talking about inside each one of us, there's only one Spirit, the Spirit of God. And we are on a spiritual walk trying to connect to that and trying to have it be. And when we are connected, I'm a different person. So Jack and I have been talking about issues and problems and a little bit about sponsorship and people coming over with that bushel basket full of manure. And when they're hooked, when they're in the middle of something that's really not working, when you're raising your kids and you're up to your ass in alligators and, things aren't all that good at work and you're just, at your end, and you go over and you have that conversation, that cup of coffee. One of the great questions of the world is, where is God in this? And in that question, you can almost change the course of a conversation in the snap of a finger. Because the moment that individual, that troubled individual, hears that question, it can literally turn the table 180 degrees, where he goes from looking through the hole in the fence below the cow's tail to being connected to the Spirit. And when we are connected to the Spirit, we have a knower. You sit in a meeting and you hear something someone says and it's really profound. Bam. Your soul just goes, oh yeah. Oh yeah. It doesn't go, I think I'll write that down. It doesn't go, I like that. It knows it has heard something that is truthful and important. And he's never heard it before. Who has heard it? Who knew it before? Some wise person once said, you can't learn anything you don't already know. How much in AA and how much in our spiritual walk does it feel like we are discovering something we have known all our lives? And it is like a missing piece of the puzzle. And it just goes, oh yeah. It just fits. And so much of those things you can't explain. This is why the talk is difficult. I've been up since 4:30 this morning wondering what I should do. Your life and who you are is so much bigger than your ego would ever let you know. The walk that you're on, the broadening of your consciousness, the connection to the knower, the opportunity to access the mind of God, the mainframe, not your little handheld computer, not your little tablet, the mainframe, the knower. I, more often than I ever have in my life, am able to be in front of things that I never would put myself in front of. When my children would have problems, I would dismiss them, or I would yell at them, or I would want an immediate resolution to what was going on. I didn't want to be in the problem. I didn't know I was afraid of the problem, And I thought their behavior was a reflection of my parenting. Hello. Um, But I am able to be in front of more things today without my reaction taking me out of it. And I was an impulsive guy. I was having a team of 4 horses, pretty headstrong, that I felt like I was holding back most of the time. And now I find out they're sheep, dragging my wagon through life. It is, so there are different lessons. I love Tim Hyland, my sponsor's meditation that he sends out about the last quarter of life. And there are struggles, and with the freedom of not, I'm still involved financially in work, but I don't do any day-to-day work. And the freedom of not being in conflict. I had a partner that I was in conflict with fairly often. And yet we know, as much as we have battled we have fought about everything other than money. Interesting. 61 years of sobriety he has, I have 57. I would not have nearly the success that I had in my life without that man. And he would not have had the degree of success. He was successful before he hooked up with me, but I wasn't. Those were those first years where I was the guy who wasn't effective and didn't work. So the process we have here is the process of removal, what's in the way. It isn't, and as we get more deeply into recovery and as we get more deeply into the steps, I think Jack or someone said the numbers fall off the steps. The steps start to do us rather than we do the steps. And I think that most of us that have been around for a long time have a sense that we need, the same way that we need a power greater than ourselves to be sober, we need a power greater than ourselves to do the steps, to get the full measure. And I don't know, out of how many people in the AA community go to an event like this. This is seekers. It's a blessing. There's something that happens over a 2 or 3 day period of time at all conferences. But there's something that happens in this conference. The collective consciousness of the men in this room, the seriousness of their undertaking and practice is just an encouragement. It is just, you sit in your chair and you think, I want to do this again. I mean, there's something happening here that is bigger than I am, and it is feeding me. And that is what, time and time again, sometimes I'm down in Mexico, people don't know, that I'm an AA guy, and sometimes we're out to dinner and they ask why I don't drink, and I tell them. And they say, you still go to AA? Yeah. Why? Ask my wife. So, pretend I got a guy that comes over to the house and he's really struggling with 4 and 5 and he's wrapped around the axle. And I say, hey, don't worry about it. I said, don't worry about the columns, just don't worry about it. I said, I want you to go to I want you to call up your ex-wife and get your wife and your kids, your mom and dad, your boss, your ex-boss, and a couple of friends from the program. I want you to invite them over to your house. And then I want you to say, we have a step in AA where we try to get in touch with their defects of character, and I'm having trouble identifying mine. You know why we wouldn't call that meeting? We don't want to change. It's worse than that. We don't want to know. We train the people in our lives. You train your wife. We're not talking about, you want to talk about that? It's going to be a tough conversation. You train your kids into what they can say and what they can't say. You train your sponsor. Your sponsor knows when you're in the game and not in the game. We don't want to know, which is why we need surrender, which is why we need the collapse, which is why we need the reduction of ego, to become vulnerable and open enough to be able to stand in front of the things that the ego will not allow us to stand in front of. And if our consciousness expands, the ego, which is a construct, it's an illusion, it's an identity that we have collected as we've gone through the junkyard of life. And you need it for the trip, part of the spacesuit. Can't get rid of it. But on a spiritual walk, it becomes a junior partner. Your intellect becomes a junior partner. Knowing is the Booby prize. Wisdom is not knowing. Wisdom cannot be taught. Ideas can be taught. Tips can be caught. The book can be shared. But wisdom, truth, is experiential. And it is not of the head. People who are locked, there are people that I know that know the book better than I will ever know the book. But they're eating the menu. No one's home. They have the words, but they don't have the connection. The connection, the change. I was diagnosed an alcoholic, young. I only had a 10-year drinking career. I was diagnosed an alcoholic when I was 17 years old. Seemed stupid and all that sort of stuff. Under psychiatric care, doing psychoanalysis for a couple of years. I've had some really crappy behavior and experiences in my alcoholism. I showed up with an enlarged liver at 24 years of age, 23 years of age. So people have been telling me for a long time, and I have known for a long time, that something was really wrong. I was pretty well equipped and pretty well situated in life. I was born on third base and been congratulating myself for hitting a triple. An intact family, 7 brothers and sisters, upper middle class. They paid for my college education. I had unbelievably great parents and great brothers and sisters. And I managed to stick everything, every relationship, lie to them, all the things that we do. And I woke up one morning hugging the toilet. I had an idea to call Alcoholics Anonymous and had to make a couple of telephone calls just to get connected to Alcoholics Anonymous. And 2 strangers, one guy was 6 months and one guy was 6 years, met me at a restaurant and told me their story. They changed my life in 45 minutes. All of a sudden, the guy who was kind of giving the bird to everybody who was trying to help, was going to 5 meetings a week, was reading a book, could not get enough of what was being presented to me. What happened? Did I do that? Not a bit. What happened? God happened. I was transformed, not just improved, not just got a new idea. Something happened that I literally changed the course of my life. I literally changed many of my actions. And little by slowly, you started to change the way I saw the world. Bob, there's two ways to be happy. One is get everything you want. The other is just change the way you respond to what is happening. That's a trick. You know, we stay sober 24 hours at a time. Yeah, you know, you've been sober 15 years. I mean, that's a trick. It's not a trick. It is a day at a time. So I'm an old guy. I'm tired of Bob. It's not a joke. I am tired of Bob. And I enjoy kind of not paying much attention to Bob. I enjoy just being present to what's going on. Now it's easier because I don't have to work, and I have a spiritual practice that I'm able to do for a couple hours in the morning. I don't have a couple of rugrats, you know, breaking in the bedroom at 6. And so some of it's easier. Some of it has to do with just age, you know, the seasons of life. The season of life I'm in is a series of small deaths. I've experienced more, you know, open heart surgery and ablations and, you know, Achilles repair and, you know, I just got a bad knee. Didn't do anything. I just have a bad knee. I was just walking. And, but there's more peace in my life than there has ever been. I enjoy loving my wife. I enjoy not putting her down. I enjoy not reacting. I just, you know, we're down in Mexico and I've had 2 really screw up. I got in a car accident down there and they were going to arrest me. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars. Finally got cleared up. My wife was really wrapped around the axle with that. I actually flew home until this thing got the dust settled. A motorcyclist ran into the back of my car and broke his leg. And when you injure a Mexican, you can be in trouble. And my attorney showed up with $10,000 in cash. How did he know how to do that? My Mexican attorney. And then when we were visiting Karen, our dying, lovely Karen, in hospice, I go through the airport and I hid a cigar lighter inside my breathing machine. Now, I have gone through and had a few lighters confiscated and I've made it through with a few lighters. But the fact that I had hidden it in my deal, they were going to arrest me. My wife is sitting on a bench looking at this asshole. I've got 4 supervisors around me at the TSA thing. It ended up that I got it, after 40 minutes, they let me go and I got a ticket. I had to go to a hearing in person. And I thank God for one of the AA guys in the group sent me to an attorney who went to the hearing in my place when I was in Mexico. And that got resolved. I don't know, I know I'm going to be fined. I don't know how much. It's either going to be 1,000 or 10,000, but it's somewhere in between. But I've been feeling a little stupid. A little old. You know, you have that car accident when you're 50 and no brainer. You have it when you're 81 and you start to wonder a little bit. I've had a little PSTD after the car accident. I'm driving a little bit more cautiously and I'm seeing things a little bit differently. As you get to be my age, your athleticism goes, your balance goes, you know, your dick goes. I mean, it is literally little deaths. But with each little death, it creates a space and a freedom. It is like the little death, the great collapse of our lives. People say, you know, the best thing ever happened to me was AA. Well, in a way, the best thing that ever happened to you was the collapse of your life. There wouldn't have been an opening for you to say yes to what? To God, to life. You are everything you are ever going to be. There is nothing wrong. There is nothing to do. There are things to be, but there is nothing to do. Now we have practices, and we have meetings, and we have steps, and we have sponsorship. But it's not about doing. People who are too much into doing and too much into structure and too much into words are somewhat on the wrong track. And all of us have spent a little time in that territory. But the knowing is of the heart. The change is of the heart. The change is of the soul. You are so much more than your ego will let you know. Your ego has got you scared, and it's got you in a box. And it's limiting and separating. The program is saying, come on in, sit all the way down. Do what we do, don't do what we don't do. Take these steps. These steps are practices, and they literally become part of the fabric of your life. They become part of the automatic way that you see. You have given me a level of integrity that I started with and sullied, and my integrity has been restored. And because of the integrity you gave me, there are certain boundaries. I just don't go outside. I don't want to pay the price. I don't want to get caught. I don't want to let you down. I don't want to do something that violates my core. I don't know how long I've talked, but I'm done. Thank you.